Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omniviewer, and I'm back with a few more thoughts on the recently revealed designs for Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah from the upcoming Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019 film. First, a quick correction to something I said in the previous video. I noted that from certain angles it looked as if King Ghidorah might in fact have some shades of green to him, while also acknowledging that this could just be a trick of the light as the green seemed to move around depending on the angle. Having seen more images since then, I can confirm it is the latter of those two. What appeared to be green really was just a trick of the light, and he actually is solid gold in color. The figure, of course, is not solid gold in substance, although at the price it's likely going to be, you might think otherwise, but that's beside the point. Moving right along, I actually wanted to make this video specifically to address the question of Mothra and her redesign. That does seem to be the sticking point this time around. Drastic redesigns do tend to be divisive. Now, as I've been looking at the different reactions since that big reveal, I've noticed there seems to be some contention as to whether or not Mothra looks more like a moth or more like a hornet. Curiously, there doesn't seem to be a direct correlation between whether or not you think she looks like a moth and whether or not you like the design. You would think there would be that correlation. People would be saying she doesn't look exactly like a moth and therefore it's a terrible design, but there are just as many people saying that who think it's an improvement. Either way, it did get me thinking. And as a result, I'd like to make a slight revision to what I said in the last video. Mind you, I'm not about to make any retractions. I still think this is a good design both on its own and for the universe of this film. Where the revision to what I said comes in regards what I said about Mothra being recognizable as a moth. Technically, that's still the case. You can look at this and still pretty much draw the determination that it's supposed to be a moth or butterfly, even though it doesn't look exactly like any sort of real moth or butterfly. But it occurred to me that's always been the case. Mothra has technically never looked like a real moth. Or let me put it this way. Mothra looks like a moth in the same way Bugs Bunny looks like a rabbit. There are a few recognizable traits from the animal in question, but otherwise you're looking at a completely made-up fantasy creature. Look back at the original design and line it up against any random kind of moth or butterfly you can find. You may find a few shared traits, but you'll never find anything that looks exactly like Mothra, because Mothra is more or less an original creature. Her base model is that of a moth, but otherwise, she's an original creature. For example, this new design. The wings are reminiscent of a Japanese silk moth. There are still features which you can look at and say are moth-like, but otherwise you're looking at a movie monster, which is basically what Mothra is. It's kind of a similar case to how Godzilla and Rodan are both based on dinosaurs and pterosaurs respectively, but neither one is an actual species of dinosaur or pterosaur. Nowhere in the fossil record, at least as far as we know, are you going to find any dinosaur that looks like Godzilla or any pterosaur that looks like Rodan. Not even the actual Godzillasaurus looks like Godzilla as far as we know. But anyway, I feel that's the same thing going on with Mothra. Now that's not saying you have to change your mind and like the design, of course, but if your only basis for not liking the design is the fact that it doesn't look exactly like a genuine moth, that is kind of missing the point. At least that's how it looks from my perspective. Beyond that, there is one last thing I wanted to address. Do you remember way back in March when this image found its way online and people were swearing up, down, and sideways that this was a leak of what King Ghidorah would look like in King of the Monsters? There were plenty of YouTube channels and websites out there who were saying exactly that. This was a definite leak, this is exactly what King Ghidorah would look like, and Legendary messed up in letting it get by them. Even as Legendary representatives and Michael Dougherty himself came forward and said, this is not what the design is, well, that clearly meant they were just lying, right? I was one of the few who said there was barely enough evidence to make any sort of claims about this, and what little bits of evidence we did have, namely those aforementioned denials, pointed towards this particular creature not being King Ghidorah. Well, thanks to the recent reveal, we now know exactly what the American Ghidorah will look like. Now you tell me, do these look anything alike? I sure don't think so. So, looks like we can finally close the book on that. And I am trying desperately hard not to gloat right now, cause, I was right again, but don't worry, I'm just gonna leave it at that. Those were really the only other things I wanted to update on, really. Like I said, Rodan's design has hardly changed at all. It's a prime example of the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So that's the extent of my follow-up for now. Until such time as we meet again, this is the OmniViewer signing off. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.